friends, welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm Jessica, and I'm on the Inspired team here at X Church, and I want to welcome you. If you're catching us for the first time, you need to rewind and go back to episode 1 of this season and listen all the way through until you get to this last episode. Yes, this is our last episode of this season, but we saved the best for last. As the cherry on top of this season, we invited Brandy Zachariah to be with us today to talk about our outreach partner with our Inspired ministry, Out of Darkness. Out of Darkness is an amazing ministry in Columbus, Ohio, who helps women who are exploited sexually get off the streets and get into health. And so she shares her story and her personal connection to why she loves Out of Darkness. Listen in. Welcome back to the last episode of this season. We're excited that you're here. And before we go any further, I want to introduce a very, very special guest that we promised you last episode. So I would like to introduce Brandy Zachariah. She is here with us today, joining us from what you guys know of Out of Darkness.
Yeah.
You are the director of the Frontline Response, which is Out of Darkness is like kind of enveloped in that.
Correct.
And so you kind of spearhead this chapter in Ohio.
Correct.
And we're just, we've paired or partnered with you guys through the years. I guess this is now year 2, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And partnering with you guys through our Inspired ministry here. And so we're excited just to have you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're at this table.
Yeah, we're glad you're here, Brandy.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you guys for your partnership. It really means a lot, and I think we have a lot of different partners and are funded by a lot of different things, but it's our favorite when it's like the body of Christ, like doing this work together as Jesus designed it. So thank you guys for your partnership and kind of joining us. So yeah, my name is Brandy Zachariah, and I am the director of the Ohio chapter of what you guys know as Out of Darkness, and we can kind of talk about that here in a minute, just a little bit about what that name means and kind of what we're transitioning into. But we launched this thing almost 8 years ago, and it really came out of God just breaking our hearts for this issue and saying,
awesome.
do something about it. And that was scary and it was hard, and there was a lot of battling that went on. There was a lot of like, I don't think you've got the right person.
Are you for real?
Yeah,
or like,
sure.
did you mean to ask another person? Or
and often on hard days, I'll be like, God, like, remember you called me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, are you sure? Like, and so it was, but I cannot imagine what would have happened in my life or what would have happened in this field if we wouldn't have said yes.
Yeah.
And so it is honestly the greatest privilege and honor of our life to do this work, and just to continue to say yes to the hard things and where God is calling us as an organization. And so, yeah, we started in the fall of 2015 and would have never imagined where we would have been 8 years later, where God would have taken us on this journey.
And I would also love to mention that we were talking before this, and you said you have 2 girls.
Yes, 2 daughters.
And I think and you said that when you really felt like I was leading you in this direction, they were like newborn and toddler.
Yes.
So I think that's amazing. I feel like when I had littles, I was like, I can't do anything but be their mom right now. But I think that I went through seasons of like where I felt like I was stretching me.
Yeah.
And it was like, how do I have any more room for anybody else? But I mean, it's very apparent that God equipped you for that. I mean, continued to put that passion on your heart so that it led you to action.
Yes.
And so can you maybe speak into like what it's like to continue to say yes? Yeah. Even when, like you said, you had people in your life that were like questioning you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you go to people and you're like, okay, guys, I think God is asking us to like help women who've been trafficked. They're like, really? Like I get the concern people had. And I had a newborn baby and a 3-year-old. And so people were like, are you sure? And it was out of like people really trying to protect and like guide and mentor me. So it was really out of a good place. But I was really left with this thought of, I say yes to what God and be obedient to what God is calling me into. And there was a season before this where I was doing another job and God was telling me to stop doing it, and I was saying no. I was a cheerleading coach. And it was my passion. It was where I got all of my like worldly desires of being known and being really good at something. And it was my passion. It's what I'd done my entire life. And he kept, for a couple of years, kept saying like, I want you to transition out of that. And I was like, no, thank you.
I'm good right here.
I'm good. And I finally got to the place where, because it was, like when God is laying
That's
this on your
right.
heart. And so I was like, okay, you're going to have to change my heart. Like, I'll at least tell you, if you change my heart, then maybe I'll be obedient to it. I was really defiant. And he really did over that last year. But I remember when I was praying about it, like, God, you have to change my heart. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do after this if I don't have this. Like, this is what I've always known and done. And I remember him saying, like, I have something bigger for you, but you have to be obedient in this first. You have to give this up first. And the cool part is I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, and he really did just begin to change my heart. I just remember like starting to be at the gym and being like, man, I really just want to be home. And I was like, what is happening? Like, that has never happened. And so he really did just begin to change my heart. And so I had my daughter in April, and that's when the season is over. And so it was a really easy transition. Literally, I was in labor at the last competition, which was in Florida, which I was really trying to go to. And my mom was like, you're not having my granddaughter in Florida.
In a different
and I was like,
state.
it's fine. I can have it in Florida and still coach. That was my commitment.
Oh, wow.
And so I was in labor. I decided not to go, but I was in labor on FaceTime with my team, still coaching them through. But that was like the final, like I knew it was my last thing too.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to give it up. And I was still on maternity leave. And this whole, like, it was almost like God took the blinders off of my eyes. Like, as soon as I was obedient to saying no to that and saying, okay, I'm going to stop coaching, he literally like took the blinders off my eyes, and like my heart just got like deeply burdened for this issue. And I was like, how did I not see this before? It was like I knew about it, but it was literally like there was blinders on my eyes. And so as soon as I was obedient, this whole world opened up. And I was probably within the first 6 weeks, because my husband was still home. He works for the state, so he got 6 weeks off. And he was still home, and there was a conference that was happening. And I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to go to this conference, but I've got a newborn baby, and I'm nursing, all of these things. And he's like, I'm going to stay home. You go. And so it was that quick of just being obedient. God's just saying, like, I told you I had something for you on the other side. And it's cool to even just now, like, I can get emotional just even reflecting back of like, gosh, he really did replace all of those things that I was, like, God, how could anything be more fulfilling than what I'm doing?
Yeah.
My gosh, this is like 10 times more fulfilling. I couldn't even imagine. So
Right.
I all that to say, like, it was scary and it was hard. And it didn't feel like it was the right time, but looking back, I'm like, it was the perfect time, right? Like, as we were growing the organization, my responsibilities have gotten more and more. And so as my kids have aged, though, it's actually worked out perfectly. As they got more independent is when my responsibilities grew. And so it might not look like it's the perfect timing on paper or in the natural, but I mean, he does know what he's doing.
Yeah.
His timing is perfect,
You're
which is
right.
the lesson in all of this.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So, so really what you're saying is that when you had these really little children,
Yeah.
that's when you were feeling like God saying, I want you to be obedient, step out. And,
Yes.
and I, it was just like what you said. I remember when my kids were little, when my three were really close in age, and it was like, I just want to survive this day.
Yes.
I can't think about anything else. And, it was like thinking about doing anything other than what was right in front of me was just like, that's
Yes.
you can't. Yet, you felt that burden and you were obedient to it. I think that's so encouraging to other women, especially who may, whatever their season is, whether it's small children or whatever it is, to say, well, everything around me says that doesn't make sense.
Right. And we disqualify ourselves.
And I think,
do.
I mean, like last
do.
podcast when we were talking about self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all that kind of thing, it's so easy to talk yourself out of what God's trying to do.
Yes.
But, you're just relaying this story about there's such great blessing
There is.
when you do that. And I think that's so encouraging.
Yeah. And I think God, like, he gets the glory. Like, because it isn't our weakness that he can get the glory, right? And if we were qualified to do what we do, like, there's not as much room for him to work and to do his things. And so I think that's the encouraging part, is as many times as we're like, are you sure, like, you've called the right people to do this, to launch this? Just seeing him be like, yeah, you know, like that confirmation of like, yes, I'm asking you, right? And I will bring you everything that you need. And it is through your weakness that I will get to show up, and you'll get to see that I am faithful and I've got you. So I think it's really cool just to kind of push through that. And it's hard. Like it's not just like there was a lot of battling that went on, right? Like it wasn't just like yes. And there was a ton of opposition. I mean, like, when you really step into things that God's calling, the enemy doesn't want you to do it. And so it's going to get a little crazy before it gets better. But God has been so faithful.
Well, yeah. And also, you're stepping into a territory that there are women that are marginalized.
Yes.
And Jesus doesn't want that.
That's right.
And so you, in what he's called you to do, stepped up and stood in the gap and was Jesus to other people. So, and back when you were talking about kind of the beginning of this, tell us a little bit about what it was like when God opened your eyes. What did you learn about the city of Columbus, how the sex trafficking was working in the city of Columbus, even maybe like statistics or what you saw and like what encouraged you to keep going and fight for housing is what you were actually talking about.
So in the journey, how it started is when God broke our hearts, we were just like, okay, let's just try to find a way to be involved in some capacity. And so we were just meeting with different nonprofits that were operating at that time. And there really just wasn't a great volunteer system, because 10 years ago, a lot of nonprofits were young in their age. And so, you know, having a way for volunteers to get involved, it's a lot, right? Like we know that on this side of it, but so there really just wasn't a great way for us to actually get involved and volunteer. So from there, we were like, let's just start meeting with all the different people in Columbus that will just say yes to a meeting. And through those meetings, we were just asking, what do you do? Kind of connecting the dots of the different organizations and asking the question, what are the gaps? And every time it was housing. And you'll pretty much still hear that answer. Housing is always a barrier. But specifically it was emergency housing. And so a lot of times we can get women into a longer term program or into housing, but it takes time. And so like, where are they supposed to go when they have an opportunity or a chance to get away from their trafficker? Then what? Where do they go in that place? And one of the stories for us is in this journey, we were just doing outreach. And really what outreach at that time was going to the streets and giving out like hats and gloves because it was wintertime. And so we're like, we'll just give out hats and gloves. And we pulled up to this woman. It was like one of the coldest nights of the year. We're like, hey, would you want a hat? You want some gloves, a coat? And in that moment, she's like, you guys are my angels. God sent you to me right now. I just got away from my trafficker. Wow. And I don't know where to go. Like, where do I go?
Yeah.
And we were literally like,
in my car?
I don't know. So we literally got in the car, called all the people that we'd been meeting with, like, hey guys, what do we do? Like, our intentions was not to go out to do what we do as outreach now, right? It was just to hand out, we're armed with gloves. Like, we don't know what else. And everyone's like, homeless shelter, like there's no place for her to go.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And they're like, that's the gap. And this was one of those confirmations when we felt like God was saying, I want you to step into housing. And we were like, oh, that feels really big. This was one of those confirmations, just like meeting her and walking her through that journey. So we're like, hey, we can take you to a homeless shelter. And we kept bringing her clothes, and we were trying to get her into a long-term program. And just every time we interacted with her, I mean, she's just scared to death. Like her
of course.
Her trafficker's like 3 blocks away. It's not secure. People are doing drugs in the bathroom at the homeless shelter. She didn't feel safe. Like she's just shaking every time we're talking to her. And I remember it was day 3, and we had a interview with a program, and we got there and she was no longer there. And I think that was the moment for us. Like we cannot move forward without emergency housing. This is, and God had been asking us to do that, but that was one of those confirmation pieces of, we've got to do this. And so that's really why we stepped into the emergency housing. It was one of the reasons why, because we got to see it firsthand of like, there really is a need for when women are saying, hey, I need a place to go. I need a place to go. We need to be able to say yes. And so the barrier, like what it looks like, I mean, it looks very different because there's so many different types of trafficking. And so there's women that are on the streets, they're homeless, there's some type of addiction, and that is leading into exploitation, whether it's for survival or whether it's they have like their drug dealer is their trafficker. It's kind of all intertwined. There's familial trafficking where it's a family member that's trafficking them. There's a larger, like more of like a cult trafficking that happens where it's associated with, you know, whether it's the Satanic Church or a different type of religion. It's kind of all intertwined in a religious like exploitation. Or there's like kind of more of like a larger trafficking ring where, you know, there's a whole system and they go state to state. So it kind of is like, I mean, there's so many different examples of what trafficking looks like. And we like
I just didn't know all those different layers.
Different layers. And so I think when you talk about barriers, there's so many barriers because it depends on the type of exploitation and what they've experienced. You know, like somebody that's been trafficked by their mom might need very different resources than somebody that was trafficked in a cult. They need a whole different set of, you know, resources. And so I think it just kind of, there are some common ones that, you know, emergency housing is typically one that a lot of women need. And so that's what we step into. Treatment options, right? Like counseling, long-term programs. Like there are some ones that like most women kind of would need after coming out of the situation, but it looks so different. And although there might be common threads of the same story, everyone's story is so different, and the type of trafficking they experienced is so different. And they might have experienced multiple layers of it. You know, they might have initially been trafficked by their mom, but then met I'm moving my microphone, sorry. Or then met a guy who said, hey, I can help you, right? And then it turned into a different type of trafficking. And so I think we like to use the term sexual exploitation because it can even include women that were in the pornography business or just kind of as a broader range. Because I think trafficking has such a like specific...
like you're stolen from a place and drugged, and then you wake up and you don't know where you are, and now you're in this ring that you can't get out of, and you're being exploited.
Yes, which is very rarely what it ever looks like.
Really,
it's almost always through a relationship. Like in talking with our law enforcement partners, we actually got a quote from one of our law enforcement partners because that is typically the story we hear. And especially I'm a mom. And so like I'm in all of the mom groups, and that is the main concern that moms have. And so we were talking to our law enforcement partners, like, will you just like give us a quote that we can like use to inform that they've never prosecuted a case that has been where they were stolen from a mall or from, you know, those typical things that we're normally afraid of. And I often tell parents, like, you're normally afraid of the wrong thing. So we're afraid of like going to the mall or Target or whatever with our children because if we turn our back, they're going to get kidnapped and trafficked. But really where it's happening is online. And so we give them full access, though, to cell phones with very little barriers or restrictions. And that's actually where they're getting groomed. And so it's almost like it's not that we shouldn't be cautious when we're out, right? I'm not saying that. We should. But also where we're seeing the grooming and the recruitment happen is online.
Right. Well, I love it that you said that because like I still have like relatively little kids, and like I don't know how many times just in even friend context you can get sent back and forth these TikToks of like I was sent a TikTok recently, like Columbus, Ohio and Easton. I'm not going to name the restaurant they said on their TikTok, but my daughter went in and the toilet seat was laced with so-and-so, and then she was drugged, and then like whatever. And so people see these clips and they're like, that's going to happen to me. And like you said, you might be scared for the wrong thing or you might be scared about the wrong thing.
Right.
But I think that brings so much awareness to parent interactions with their kids of their online activity. Because like, so what do you guys commonly see as your women come into your housing? Does it usually like they're having to break ties with people online, or are they able to pinpoint and identify that it stemmed from a certain exposure or
platform? And I think we work with adult women. So I think if you talk to some of the organizations that work with children, they're going to be able to see that and talk a little bit more to that, where the women that we work with, there is some of that for sure. But I think a lot of them are like, you know, okay, so my age people, like, that wasn't really a thing in our like teenage, early 20s, right? And so we're starting to see it more and more. but I wouldn't say it's the main thing we see yet. But I think that's only because by the time the women are coming to us, there's so many years past, right? Like that wasn't really the thing when they kind of got into the life. But we are seeing more and more from people that work with young adults or children or youth that is where the grooming and recruitment is happening, is online. And our law enforcement partners will talk about that too. And just even talking with friends and family that have had people, our kid was talking to this person online and they thought it was, a guy, or they thought it was a girl. It goes both ways. They'll use different, depending on what their tactic is, right? Whether it's a guy and they're trying to just like build a romantic relationship, or if it's a girl and they're just trying to build a friendship. And it's normally there's normally not a lot of red flags in the very beginning. Right. But if you really follow those conversations, you'll begin to see that they're either going to start asking for money, or they're going to start trying to say like, well, we need to be in person. I'm the only one that, sees you and I can take care of you. Like, you don't need your mom. They're really trying to bridge a gap and trying to meet in person. But that's really where the relationships are starting to be built, is online. And so I think social media is a big thing we need to have conversations about. And it doesn't mean that I think the age matters.
Yes, definitely.
The age. And I have my daughter's about to turn 13 in a week. And so this is a real conversation in our
teenager years.
This is a real thing. Just what apps are going to be allowed and what are the restrictions that are going to be had, because you really can, they can delete the things, right? Like you can say like, oh, I check her phone. I do. We check. My husband loves every night to like read through all of her text messages and check her phone. But also, she can delete things, and they're really hard to uncover. Right. So I think it's really important conversation, and just be in your kids' like business. Like talk about this stuff. It's so hard. I get it as a mom. It's so hard. And my youngest daughter will talk about anything. She's so open and like has no shame. Right.
Different personalities with kids make a big difference on how deep you go into their life.
Definitely. My 13-year-old doesn't want to talk about anything.
Right.
She's like, Mom, stop. Like she hates it. And I'm like, sorry, honey. We're going to talk about some really awkward things. Right. Like, but it is hard and it is awkward, and you don't have to do it perfect. And I think so long, we're like, give us a script, and I get that. But just have those conversations. Make sure that they're aware. Like, put really strong boundaries in place of like where they can go, who they can go with, and let your kids live their life, right? Like, I don't want to. You don't want to scare them. I don't want my daughter to be so scared, right? And live in fear. That's not what God has called us to. But also, they need to be aware,
right?
So here's a question: What would you say to someone? Say who lives in the area where we are right now, Canal Winchester, suburban Southeast, Central Ohio, and all this kind of thing, and they just say, oh, well, that's a downtown Columbus problem.
It's not. It's not. I think that's really, so it goes both ways. This is what we get. People think it is either kind of like that's downtown, and we stay away from those areas of town because of that, which is not what's true either. Or we'll just give examples of like, well, yeah, like we've had women come from Canal, Westerville, like we'll just say cities, and they're like, oh, I heard Westerville is a really big problem area, because we said it happened there. So I try to be really careful about how I say this. Trafficking can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter if it is an area that's more impoverished, there's a lot of poverty, or crime. It doesn't matter if it's like a really high-end suburb. Like the women that we serve in the Safe Home will tell, like there's a myriad of, some of them were downtown on the streets of Columbus. Some of them went to some of the most upscale private homes in Columbus, right? Some of them were in the suburb and got trafficked by somebody they went to school with in one of our, Columbus suburbs. So it really doesn't, I think we just need to, there's such a curiosity that we always want to know, like, well, I need to know where it's happening so I can stay away or be protected. And I think we can't do that. It can happen anywhere, right? It doesn't have any type of specific. Now, there are some, we can look at our data and say, okay, typically a higher percentage of women who had child sexual abuse end up in some type of trafficking or exploitive situation. We can see that data does kind of, individuals that were in the foster care system, they have a higher rate of ending up in these situations. But we have women that grew up in the best homes, right? And had Christian homes, the best home, the best schools, all of the love and support, and met the wrong guy, right? Or, we have women that had an accident, got prescribed like a drug to help heal, and then got addicted to that drug, and then it led into a full-blown addiction, and she ended up on the street. So I think it's kind of just there's such a curiosity we have about this stuff, and I think just to kind of ease that and just say, like, it can happen to anyone at any place, and it's more just being aware about, like, what are the things that can, like, lead into these situations? What are the red flags that we need to look for?
Yeah.
So how do you guys get the word out about you?
What we do.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, what happens when you have an abundance of people contacting you at one time and you only have a certain amount of space? And like, how do, like, because how do you get the word out to the suburbs and also to the downtown areas and even just the surrounding areas? How do you get your name out to where people can feel like they can contact you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's because there's so many different layers of trafficking and how it happens, then we really have to kind of have a wide range.
Right.
And so we work a lot with hospital systems, and that's,
good.
Heather, like, she's great. We love you, Heather. In connecting us with, like, forensic nurses and making sure that there's protocols in hospitals for identification. Because typically, if you experience this at some level, most of the time, women are going to be going into a hospital setting at some time, right? So what are the places that we can identify this stuff in the schools? How can teachers identify, like, there's something seems a little bit off or something's happening?
Yeah.
And so kind of doing a wide range of trainings with different professionals or in different settings is one way. We work closely with law enforcement. We do a lot of outreach. So we do street outreach. We have our drop-in center. We're in the jails. So having a wide range of outreach specifically targeted to women that are in the life in different capacities. And then partner organizations. And so really kind of building a strong network of partner organizations so that no matter if they're reaching out to this organization, if they need emergency housing, they know they can call us. And I'd say, our outreach, the women we see at the drop-in center, obviously they're pretty much all from Columbus. It's where they kind of were raised. Most of them are from Columbus. Our safe home, about 50% of the women in our safe home are from out of state.
Oh, wow.
And so we take women from all over the state of Ohio. We take women from all over the nation. Part of that is our national partners that we work with. So we work with a national hotline, Rescue America. And so when they get a call, they call us, and we work together to bring that woman in. And as we've done that, more and more, we've worked with different hospitals across the country, different organizations across the country. And so that's really kind of where a lot of the women coming into the safe home are starting to come from, is out of state, which can be good too. Kind of getting you away from that environment where you can't just kind of walk back out the door and into, you're not in close proximity, which is really important.
So what are you guys, how are you guys helping women that are coming through your doors?
Yeah.
What is the sustainable care that you guys are helping them with?
Yeah. So when it comes to outreach, it's really just trying to get them connected to resources. So when you are ready, when you have an opportunity, whatever that looks like for each individual, because they truly do have to have an opportunity, but they also have to be ready.
Right.
And so just making sure that they know, here are the resources, here's our hotline number, or, here's the number for detox, or here's the number for whatever resource that whatever path they want to go. And then for the safe home, when they come in, really our goal is to get them connected to a long-term program. We're a short-term stay. Really, our heart is to kind of bridge that gap from giving them a safe place to land from whatever situation they're coming out of, whether it is they're literally coming from that situation into our safe home, or if it's been a little while and they're like, I have tried to get a job, I have tried to live my life, and I need some healing.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't just go back and try to function. And so they don't have to be coming straight out of it.
Yeah, it's not like immediate.
It's not immediate. And then giving them a couple of days to really, like, be in a safe place where like all of their needs are met and basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, all of that. And then they can begin to like go through the process of like, what am I actually looking for?
Yeah.
Because most of the time what we're seeing is women have to make a long-term decision out of a moment of crisis.
Absolutely.
So they're in crisis, they need help immediately. And they're like, well, there's this one long-term program you can go into, or this is the only place that we can find for you.
Right.
And so they're like, man, I have to move all the way across the country, or I have to make this choice because it's the only choice. And so our heart is to say, like, come into our safe home, take a couple of days, and then our case manager and team will come alongside and say, okay, what are your goals? Where do you want to live? What state do you want to live in? What state don't you want to live in? What's really important to you? Is it education? Is it job training? Is it just you really want a really good like trauma therapy program? What is it? And then working with our long-term programs to really kind of customize or find the best program for them. So, and giving them a lot of options and choices. Like, you get to choose, you know, like, look at this program and see what they offer, and look at this program and see what they offer.
Yeah.
And then just providing that support along the way.
Yeah.
So
what a gift that is, though, to give them choices.
Yes, that is the most important.
Because, you know, what they're coming out of, there is no choice.
Right.
There's so little choice.
So little choice.
You know. So how long do women normally stay with you?
Yeah, so it depends on their barriers too. So the more barriers women have, you know, if they've got a high level of mental health diagnosis, plus an addiction, plus, you know, a physical ailment, or, you know, whatever it is, the more barriers they have, the harder it is to find placement. Yeah. So there's women that will come in and we're able to get them placed within like 3 to 5 days. And then there's women that are with us for several weeks. The longest we've had is 3 months. Typically, it's normally around the 3 to 4 week time period, but we're going to stay with them until we find a placement for them. And so if they go past that time, we're not going to say, okay, well, you've been here too long, right? We're going to keep working until we find the best placement.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's
but
really
choice
good.
is so important. And so as much as that we can, and even at our drop-in center and all of the things that we do, implementing choice, like, it needs to be their choice in any path that they want to go. If they don't want to go to a long-term program, that's fine. What do you want to, like, what is the path that you want to go down? And just supporting them on that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the drop-in center? Like, that's in downtown Columbus?
Yeah, that's off of Parsons Avenue. So our drop-in center is a house where women can come in. We're open 3 days a week and get kind of basic needs. So we do meals, and we really like to do them family style. So we're sitting down around a table and just having normal conversations. And they don't have to. They can take the meal to go if they want. But so we're having meals. We have toiletries. We have clothing. We have resources there. They can do laundry. They can take a shower. So it's really just kind of meant to be kind of like a respite, a place that they can kind of come in, kind of just like let their guard down for an hour or however long they choose to stay, get some food, get some clothes, get some prayer. We do lessons and different things too, just kind of helping them kind of, so oftentimes when you're living in they're living in constant crisis, right? They're in survival mode.
Right.
And so even just trying to be like, hey, listen, let's, even just for like this next 5 minutes, will you dream with me? You know, like, what do you think? And that's really hard. You know, when you're in survival mode, it's really hard to dream and
Switch
think
gears
that you can even, I don't even know how I'm going to get out of this situation, or that that I'm worth getting out of the situation, that I could actually do it, like I'm strong enough, all of those things. So even just trying to get them to dream beyond their current situation. And we often say we'll hold the hope bubble for them. So they might not be able to like hold hope that they ever could get out of the circumstance, but we'll say, that's okay. We'll hold that for you. We believe that you can. We believe in you. And we'll hold on to that until you're ready to carry that for yourself.
Wow.
And so just kind of helping them, you know, even pushing them to be like, hey, you want to dream for a little bit? And sometimes they're like, no. I'm like, that's fine. What's going on? Let's talk. You know, like meeting them where they're at is really our heart.
Yeah.
Like, but really try to say like, hey, we believe in you. We see you. You
I
are
love
important.
that.
God sees you.
So empowering.
So yeah, trying to break through that shame, because shame is the biggest thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's so much shame, and it's
There
just
is.
like the heads are down, the eyes are down. You know, it's
Yes.
just they carry so much shame, and so just be able to speak like life over them and speak how God sees them. So
That's so empowering.
I was going to say that has to be very, very healing. And one of the thoughts I had too is that really the lives that these women live is probably so foreign to just about anybody who's listening to this.
yes, yeah,
And you know how it is that when you don't really have, you know, there's one thing to say, oh, you know, missions is great, you know, but it's another thing to actually be there and be the feet on the ground and actually see what's going on and seeing how people live and seeing, you know, all those things. It
Yes.
puts it in a whole different place because it puts a face to it, you know.
It does.
So, but I was thinking that so many, and I mean, I have to agree, even myself, it's like I have, in a way, I have no concept of what these
Yeah.
women are going through.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
can you maybe talk about that a little bit as far as, you know, like what do they go through mentally and emotionally and physically and all? It's just, to me, it's because we have no frame for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that goes back to, it can look different depending on their type of exploitation that they're experiencing. But I think the thing that we can kind of like, we can understand the like sexual violence, right? Like we can kind of, even if we don't, and I don't think we need to fully understand the sexual violence that they go through, but I think we can kind of like understand it to the point that we would need to understand it. I think we can even, because we've talked about domestic violence for so many years, I think we can even understand, you know, the physical violence that could occur. And it doesn't happen, the physical part isn't a part of everyone's story, but it is pretty entwined in most of the women's stories. And whether that's from the trafficker or whether that's from the buyer, it goes both ways. But I think the part that is harder to understand for us is the emotional and psychological trauma that they experience. Whether it's the trauma bond to the trafficker, whether it's the shame piece that comes in, I think that is the harder thing to break. And so just even some of those statements I just made, I think when they come into the safe home and just even to begin to, it's still even hard to be like, gosh, that tie that you have with this lifestyle or this person is so hard to overcome and to break. And it's not because there was so much psychological manipulation. There was so much speaking, like, you're not worth it. You're not good enough. This is all you're good for.
Yeah. And at some point you start believing it.
You start believing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if that's all you hear, at some point you just give up, right? And you just say, okay, like, you must be right. You know, this is what I keep hearing.
Yeah, if you feel like you're totally ruined.
Yeah.
And damaged beyond repair.
Right.
Then you're not going to want,
That's
can't see
right.
those, like you said, let's dream for a little bit.
Yeah.
How can I?
Right.
And if you think about shame, if we've ever experienced shame, I mean, it can be debilitating.
Oh, absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
is hard to overcome. And I remember, like, there was a season where I, like, struggled with shame from, like, some past things in my life. And I'm like, it took forever to break that off, and for it to not stay there. And so I think the psychological, like, manipulation that happens, right? And even just, you know, a lot of women will come in and be like, they'll go to hospitals and they're like, you're crazy, because what they've experienced is so traumatic and so hard for us to understand how people can be so evil that when you say it to somebody else, there's almost like this immediate non-belief because it's too hard to wrap our heads around. So it's easier for us to be like, oh, that can't be true, right? Like, because we can't fathom that people could be that evil. And so I think they also be like, nobody believes me. I've tried to come forward. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. And then the traffickers will use that too, of like, oh, you're, you know, like they'll tell them, like, I track you everywhere I go. Like, I will always have eyes. I work with law enforcement. There's no place that you can go that you're safe.
They want to make them feel more isolated.
That's right.
So they feel cut off from everybody. Well, and another psychological thing has to be trust. Like,
oh, gosh, yeah.
You probably experience many women who are very resistant to what you offer because they don't know if you're trying to, like, bait and switch them they have
100%.
been baited before.
So both parts of that, they're like, well, how do I know you're not working with my trafficker, right? And most of the time, it's not that the trafficker has that much relationship and control and power, but that's what they're telling them.
Well,
so that
that's
they
what they
stay,
perceive.
That's what they perceive, right? And so it's just honoring, like, you're right, we don't actually know how much control and power he has, right? But also that there's a lot of, like, I'm just waiting for you guys to pull the rug. Like, this is too good. Like, this is too safe. Like, and that feeling of, you know, it's too quiet, it's too safe. I feel like going back to the known sometimes is easier than, like, moving forward in this really unknown, like, just trust us, you know, phase. And so at least back there, I knew exactly what was expected of me. But a lot of women, I mean, there's a lot of women that'll say, I'm just waiting for the rug to be pulled out. Like, I'm just waiting for this to all kind of switch, the bait and switch. Or, gosh, like, nothing is for free. So I don't believe that, like, I mean, we've had women that just, like, want to eat or want to accept anything from us. Right. And so because they're like, that can't be for free. Yeah. You're going to ask for something. Yeah. You know, and so just really just being gentle and working alongside that. And those are the hardest moments.
That
like,
breaks my heart.
Those are the moments when I sit there and I'm like, man, that the trust has been broken so much in their life, you know? And so we always bring Jesus into that, like, listen, like, you know, like the kind of like redemptive story of Jesus. And listen, we don't deserve anything that we've gotten, but, like, Jesus is our Savior and he has redeemed us. And so he gives us free gifts. And so that's what we're doing for you. Like, we're just doing what God did for us, you know? And so trying to bring that piece in, because most of the women are really open to Jesus and really open to God. And so that's really fun to kind of like introduce them to Jesus. Whether a lot of women already know. They're like, oh, I love Jesus. I'm so glad we get to go to church, you know.
Yeah.
And even if they're not, you know, there's definitely an openness to it. And so really being able to like bring that in is a really cool part too.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What would you say would be one of the most inspiring stories that you have heard or been a part of in the last 8 years?
Every time I talk about this, people are like, what is, typically ask, like, give us like one story that's their favorite or whatever. And I think it's really hard.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I think
every story is inspiring. I mean, when a woman decides to get their life under their control instead of allowing someone else to control it, that's inspiring.
It's inspiring.
Yes, that's right.
And whether it was just like in the smallest of ways or like in the biggest redemptive story, right? Like I think every piece of it is just like an honor to be able to sit and see like how God works, right? And like see, gosh, all of the miracles that he does for the women. And so it's really hard. And I think that because so many of them are like, there's several women that we've had in the safe home that are just even, I think, seeing them from day one until they go into their long-term program. I think that's my favorite part. So like, I'm going to kind of switch it to like, what's my favorite part? Because I think that's the favorite part of the story that I get to see is even just in that time, just seeing them kind of come in just like completely defeated and not trusting anything or anyone, which rightfully so. But then by the end, and even in just, I mean, they have such a long journey ahead of them of true healing and unpacking the trauma that they've experienced. But so just even in the short time period that we get, just to even begin to see that change is incredible. But just even seeing like joy and laughter begin to like happen in the house and experience that. I think that's kind of my favorite things is just beginning to see that journey happen, right? Like coming in from completely defeated, just filled with shame. Yeah. And then just, it's almost like as they stay, like their load gets a little bit lighter, right? And they start interacting a little bit more and they start laughing and you begin to see like who they are as a person, right? And not their story, but who they are as a person. And so I think that's probably my favorite part is just really watching the growth and seeing that even in that short time, just seeing God kind of like bring back their true self to light. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I do too. That is so cool. And
I mean, I'm not going to say special. I might have like almost cried about 8 times this episode.
I know. It's actually kind of shocking I haven't yet. Like this is like really good. But I think that's the thing. Like so many times when women are wanting to get into the work that we do, it's what can I offer, right? Or they're scared. Like, is this dangerous? Is the question. Like, is this even safe? The work that you guys do, right? And so. And even going back to like, should you be doing, like, you know, 8 years ago, people were like, are you sure? And I'm like, I guess Jesus is saying yes. So, but I think getting to do this, like it outweighs anything. Like, you know, it only spurs me on to be like, okay, God, what else do you have? Like, I don't care how scary it is. I don't care how overwhelming, how big it may seem, because like getting to see this every day is like, I can't imagine not, right? Like, I can't imagine, like, it's worth the hard days. Yeah. So.
Well, it's kingdom work.
It's kingdom.
You actually get a glimpse into, like, his kingdom being built.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the part that can make me just, like, see, that's the part that, like.
Undone.
Can make me undone. Like, God, I just don't even, that's the piece I'm like, God, wow, like, you chose me to get to do this. Like, that is, I just don't, like, I am so undeserving. Like, that is just. I can't even like put into words this. It is hard work. Like it is really hard, and it's
sacrifice.
There's a lot of sacrifice, and there is a lot of sacrifice as being a mom and being a wife and like trying to do it all well, right? Like there are times I'm like, man, I really want to be able to do this with my daughters, but I also have to, you know, kind of. I do have to bear that kind of and do that well, right? I'm not going to sacrifice my children for the work and vice versa. But doing that well, and you just have to believe that God's going to give you the grace to do it all, right? But there is a sacrifice to it as well. And it's, you know, we get to talk about the fun stories, but a lot of days it is, gosh, is this even making a difference? Yeah. Right? Like it is. There are seasons where the women are just continuously coming into the safe home and going back, you know, because they're just not quite ready. Right. And so it's not always like that, you know, when we get those stories and we just got an email last week of someone that came to our drop-in center and we haven't seen her in like 6 months to a year. And so she just emailed us and was like, I think this is you guys. I just want to let you know I'm doing amazing. Like when we get those emails, it's almost like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, okay, thank you, Jesus. We needed that today.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like, okay, this is why I do what I do.
This is it.
Right.
And I always tell the team, like, even on the weeks where it's just like continuously like feeling defeated.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell them like, guys, just even us being a safe space for, even if they're here with us for 5 minutes, for us to, like, they feel the love of Jesus when they walk in.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like they got to see
And
it.
I'm sure they think about it all the time.
That's right.
Because if you create an environment for them to feel safe,
Yes.
when they're not in a safe place, then they, at least they can have the other alternative.
That's right.
They can even
Right.
see a picture of, you know, once, because it's like the whole darkness light analogy. Like you can't know light until you've seen dark. I mean, like in a light lights up a dark place. And so they might have never known a safe space. And for them to be able to walk out with that experience, and even if it's a seed that's been planted.
That's right.
I was going to say that's
Those
the thing
seeds.
that I kept thinking of as you were talking about the things that you do, like for the drop-in center, and
Yes.
just thinking about all the seeds that are planted. And like you said, they have to be ready.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you're planting seeds, and so you're giving them an alternative.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, once they've heard it, you can't unhear it.
Yeah.
You can't, you know, it's in there to know that, oh, you know,
Yeah.
even it's just say, well, you know, those people, you know, and they were talking about
Yeah.
Jesus, maybe there is something to that.
Yeah.
And you don't know what,
Yes.
you know, what the fruit is going to be from that.
That's
Somebody
right.
else gets to harvest it or whatever.
That's right.
But,
And that goes for
yeah.
anything that God is calling us to step into. And that
That's
goes for me.
right.
I mean, like when God was calling me into this, there was a whole lot of like, I don't think I can do this. You know, like it was all the same things that, you know, we work with the women on. And people speaking in and saying like, yeah, you can. You know, God has called you to this. He's going to equip you for it. Right. And so regardless of what we're doing in the kingdom, like, it's the same story,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We all have
That's
to be
right.
ready to say yes to that next thing. And it is normally going to be scary.
Yeah.
It is normally not going to make sense
Outside
and
of
not
our
be
comfort
familiar.
zones.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same thing that we've experienced, you know, in our journey. And so to say like, we're coming, it's a different scenario and theirs has a lot greater risk involved in it, right? And consequences. But I can stand here and say like, it's worth it, you know?
So, at last Inspired Conference, we had people gather full-size toiletries, and
Yes.
so those go to the drop-in house, right?
They go to both, but yeah, where we really need them is at the drop-in center because we see about 20 women on average every time we're open, and we're open 3 times a week. And so they just kind of fly off the shelves there. So there's a greater need there. And then we do provide all of that at the safe home, but the women there's just like less of a frequency at the safe home. So yes.
And then this winter, we were able to provide coats and blankets and
yes.
boots. And I think didn't Heather email you and just say like it was like God's provision because just as you guys were out and empty, this new like
yes.
Yeah,
wave
it was
of
like
coats
that
came
Monday,
in.
the last blanket went out the door, and then she picked up the, you know, all of the blankets we did, and then they were there for the next time you were open.
Yeah.
And so you had a blanket for everybody, you know, and it was, you know, it's just, to me, that's like, that's such a testimony of how faithful God is.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my, you know,
I like, that's a piece I haven't even like, I can't even, like, there's so many things, like I could literally talk about this for like hours, but I mean, just God's faithfulness to us as an organization and individually over the years has just been like, he's provider, right? Like
Right.
he always provides. And it might not always seem like, I'm like, God, I feel like we need more. I feel like, you know, but his time is always perfect and he always does. Just in those moments to see him provide and show up is really cool.
Yeah.
And we've already mentioned that coming into this Inspired Conference on May 6th, we're going to be collecting underwear
Yes.
for the house. And
Such a need.
Yeah. So,
can I just say that I'm really excited that we're doing that.
shades, all kinds, all sizes.
That's right.
I am just so pumped about it because I can't.
What other place can you just
A
rally
women's-
around that,
yes,
get
a
a big
women's
group of women to
conference.
say, bring
That's
the
right.
underwear.
Bring the underwear.
Yes, you know, that's not exactly a conducive kind of collection for a Sunday morning
No.
at church, but for a women's conference, and I mean, it's so specific, and you know, I don't know, it's just, I don't know what to say. It's like something near and dear to every woman's heart. It's like, well, we have to have these
Yes.
things.
Well,
you
think
know?
about that. When
Yeah.
you
Right.
get donations, I mean, we don't take used underwear.
Obviously.
Right. So
Right. Bring 'em
obviously
with
we
tags.
don't get underwear donations.
Right.
But I mean, that is the thing that is missed because, we get most of the clothing that we get is like donations as people are cleaning out their closets and stuff. But this is, I mean, you need underwear and you need, a specific amount for, and if you don't have access to laundry, this is like it's one of those things of like, gosh, like it's just our worth and our value, right? To not have that is just like,
it's so basic. It's a basic need,
but it brings so much value.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you guys are doing it.
So outside of being able to bring something to a conference, how can women listening partner with you guys? Is there a process that you are able to direct us and guide us in if people want to just play a part or just to be helping hands or whatever? Yeah.
So yes, the answer is yes. And it's in a lot of different ways. And so if you're like, you know what, like one-on-one with the women, I don't know if that's quite my thing, or maybe it's not quite your thing yet. You can start by making Princess Night, which is our street outreach. We hand out like a handwritten card of just like a short phrase of encouragement and then our hotline number. And so we have people from all over write cards and we hand those out on Princess Night every week. And so writing cards, you can get together with your small group or your family even. I think it's a really fun activity to do as a family and bring like maybe your teenagers into it or bring your younger kids into it and they draw a cute little picture, right? And so there's a lot of work. We have a jail pen pal program where all you're doing is writing letters back and forth with women that are in jail. Or you can come to our drop-in center we have a jail mentor program we're launching. So where you go into the jail and meet one-on-one with women, coming to the safe home and doing like a game night or cooking with the women or whatever it may be. There's so many different ways. Or even just on the back end of like, we go to a lot of events and have a table. And so just like, if you are just passionate about like just talking and sharing this cause, then you kind of being on our ambassador team and being able to go to events with us and kind of share about the work that we do. So there's so many different things. I think if there's a fear of like, I don't know that I want to do direct care or I don't know, don't let that stop you because there's so many different ways that you can get involved. And what we typically see is people will kind of start here and then by the end of it, like, they're doing all of the things. And so we do have a application process for anything outside of street outreach. You have a full training, you have an application, background checks, like the whole gamut of a thing that you have to go through. But you can go to our website and it's all on our website.
Okay. So I know you mentioned at the beginning talking about how Frontline Response is where we're going to be. That's the name we're probably going to be hearing more than Out of Darkness in the coming months and years. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So our organization name is Frontline Response. And really that is what we're called to do is to be on the front lines of this issue. And so it kind of just is like the perfect name to kind of represent what we do. Out of Darkness is our anti-sex trafficking department. So as an organization, we have a whole department that works with individuals that are unhoused or homeless. We have a prevention department, and then we have our anti-sex trafficking department, Out of Darkness. Here in Ohio, currently, we only are doing the anti-trafficking work. So you guys have really, truly only known us as Out of Darkness. But as we expand across the country, and we have a lot of cities that we're going to be going into in this next year, and so the different cities are going to be doing different parts of our programming. And so we're really going to start moving to the name Frontline Response and less of using our department name and more of our organizational name. So you guys will kind of hear us kind of switching. We don't want to lose the heart and the reputation of Out of Darkness because we've been doing this work for 10 to 12 years as a whole. And so it's got a name across the nation. So we're kind of slowly transitioning to use Frontline Response a lot more. And kind of warming people up to that name. So Out of Darkness isn't lost, but just transitioning to using the name Frontline Response.
Awesome. Yeah. What is your website?
So that will eventually transition, but it is outofdarknesscolumbusoh.org.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's where you can find the application process, the application form, all that.
Yep.
Awesome.
You can find us on social media too. It's Out of Darkness Ohio on all the social media platforms. And from there you can find our link to our website as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have anything? I feel like you just explained things so well.
This just kind of came to me. You said that, are there other Out of Darknesses in Ohio?
Not in Ohio.
But this is it for Ohio.
This is it for Ohio.
Because I know we have people who listen from all over.
Well, and that's important to know. So if you're not in Columbus, that's okay. We're in the middle of having conversations of like I said, we take women from all over the country and all of the surrounding states. And if they're in a surrounding state, if we can send a team for like a rescue team to go pick them up and bring them to the safe house, we prefer that than bringing them in on a bus or another mode of transportation. And so if they're not kind of far enough out to fly to us, then we'd prefer to send a team, but sometimes we just don't have the teams that can do that. And so we would love to have more rescue teams across Ohio. That can kind of, if we have somebody coming from Cleveland or a surrounding Indiana or Kentucky, wherever it may be, that we can find a team that's close enough to them to get them to be able to be transported by one of our team members to the safe home. So also hotline, our hotline, we have a 24/7 hotline. You can do that from anywhere. And so there are opportunities, even if you're not like in central Ohio, to serve.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that you came because,
Yes.
I
too.
feel like I just learned a lot of information that I didn't know previously. I've loved getting to hear like just your personal heart behind it, like how
Yes.
God called you into it and how you've been obedient. And I did think of one thing, like I know you said that you probably feel like some days or weeks or stretches where you ask, are you even being effective or are you moving forward or what? And I just, at that moment, I thought of just what a testimony you are to your daughters, because I think more than anything, like with women our age and, like just our age collectively, is that we care about the next generation deeply.
Yeah. Yes.
And so many times we don't really know how to be the best, or we don't know the best way to lead the next generation. And so, like we have listeners that are younger, like high school. And so, I'm just saying that as a mom, I think that's just amazing. Like your obedience to God and doing uncomfortable things and having conversations that are hard with women just paves the way for them, I think, to know that nobody is outside of God's love.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I'm definitely like taking a lot of swallows and deep breaths right now to like not choke up, because I think that is like, gosh, if my daughters are like, you know what, like I remember my mom just said yes to God, like, like, and that's what they remember, over the sacrifices or over what our lives could have looked like if I didn't do this, right? Like, I think that is the thing that I would love. And I think even for me, as they're getting older, to be like, you know what, like for so long we try to protect them and keep them in this bubble. And so even as they're getting, they're going to be 10 and 11 or 10 and 13 this month. And so just even being like, you know what, it's time to start like exposing you to some things that are hard, but like, I don't want them to live this like in this safe kind of bubble, right? Like I want you to see the world, and it's going to be hard. And that means like, dang, that means I'm going to have a lot of hard conversations.
But I think that you're so right, because like you said, you feel like there was like God took the blinders off your eyes because you're like, I wasn't really aware that this was happening. And I think that as a job as a parent is to kind of like slowly take those blinders off for our kids, and it's uncomfortable. It is. And like you said, it really like has to, it gives way to uncomfortable conversations. But how much more, because I think this as I parent my kids, how much more will they be ahead in being able to view the world like God sees it. That it's not like something that we have to fear. It's not something that we have to be afraid of, but instead having eyes filled with hope towards like what God wants to do and restore and redeem in his people and in his creation. And so I think that's just so empowering that you said yes, that you lead a family that you're not afraid to expose these hard realities to. I think that's just amazing.
And truly, like I haven't talked about the team a lot, but like we got to do it together. Like there was 3 of us that kind of like launched this thing. And so like he gave us community in it, right? Like doing it together. And that's, that was God, right? Like that was Jesus. Like that's how he lived his life, was in community. And so I think that's the really cool part, is that there is such a community that we get to do this together. And so I think that part is also the blessing, that like I didn't have to do it alone. Like we had a team of us that, whether it was Jamie, Tiffany, and I from the beginning, or now we've got like this army of volunteers and staff, but that we've just got to do this together. And that's the really cool part. And that's kingdom, right? Like that's how he wants it to be done. Like it's never going to be about any of us. Like it's only going to be like for the glory of God, like that he is known at the end of this. And like that, I think that's our hearts always is like, we don't ever want like any, like literally like, it's kind of laughable when we're like, oh, you guys have done all this. We're like, no, like really, I'm not kidding. Like this is all Jesus. Like I promise you. Don't give us any credit. It's all Jesus.
Right. I mean, it's like I
you
can't
only
remember
knew.
what psalm it is. I think it's the first verse, but it says not to us.
Yes.
Not to us, but to
your
you.
name.
Be the name be the glory. And that's, that's really it.
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
it.
bottom line.
It is.
And it should be the bottom line of everything that we do. Whether it's raising our kids at home or, working with people who are exploited sexually or, ministry or, being, a server or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's,
Such a lesson
whatever
in that.
success we have, it's really not us. It's really to point, because we were all broken
That's
in
right.
some way. And we still are, but we're
Yeah.
working on it.
And for the next generation, I think so many, and speaking as moms, like, so many times, like we are their savior, right? Like we step in and fix the things for them and their problems, and we go to them and counsel them when they're. And I think there's been a switch. I've been talking with just some different mentors, and being like, I remember one of my friends said I was really struggling with this, and I knew that if I told my mom or dad, they'd be like, their heart, they would be so sad about it, or they, whatever it was, and so they're like, I just kept it quiet, and so they were like, now I'm teaching my kids, like, take that to Jesus. And that was something that switched in my brain of like, man, I don't ever want to point people towards me, whether I'm mentoring them or like in my work or with my children. Like, am I pointing them to Jesus? Like, am I saying, hey, hun, like mommy will pray with you. Let's talk through this. But also like, why don't you talk to God about this, right? Like, are we pointing people to Jesus as the answer or ourselves as the answer?
Yeah.
Remember, that was like a pivotal, like, ooh.
Well, and it's kind of, it kind of steps on your toes because you're like, you're not doing it intentionally.
No.
But
No.
like what you want to communicate is that, that I have a rescuer and I've been saved and this is what I know.
This is
and
what I've
here's
learned.
the wisdom that I have behind it. And I want the same for you. Like I want the same experience for you. So I'm going to show you how I did it, when a lot of times that really kind of steals God's glory in some ways because we're not allowing God to be God in their story.
Yeah.
And he might have a different plan, a different route, a different way of teaching. And so you're right. Cause I live that every day because I can see like with my boys, it's just like, I know how to do it, but I'm not going to do it for you because I want you to experience the provision and how God shows up for you.
Yeah.
Well, and it's easy because when they're little,
Yes.
you are kind of like their source.
You are.
So
You
you
are.
have to do all the things.
You do all the
all of
things.
it.
You answer all the why questions.
Yes.
You do all of it. You're teaching them how to do this or that, and then you're right. It comes to a point in their growth that it's like, if I keep doing that's not good.
Right.
It's not good for them. That's going to stunt their growth, and I need to step back. And I think one of the things that is so valuable is when you can, share with your kids, especially when they're a little bit older, to say, you know what, this situation is here. I'm not really sure what to do.
Yes.
So let's pray right now. To say, or to have them see you praying or whatever, or talking to a mentor or whatever, but just to say, oh gosh, mom really doesn't know it all.
Oh, that's a revelation. I remember when I started seeing my parents and like that they were just humans, I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's like the same thing of going to your kids and saying, please forgive me because, I lost my temper or I did something that was wrong. That you're teaching them that and how important that is, but they need to see that you don't have all the answers.
Right.
And that points them to Jesus.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'm so thankful that you
thank you
came
guys.
and joined us and took time out of your schedule. And it was super helpful, and I know it will be helpful for our listeners. And I would encourage you, if you're listening, to share this episode with your friends, even if they're not in the area. I know Brandy was just going through a whole list of ways to connect people to their services. Yeah. And so if you know anybody that is in the thick of it and could be exploited in any way, there's a resource for you. There's a way out. And like she said, they just take in women and believe in them. And so if you know that to be true in any of your circles or even distant relatives around the nation, whatever, contact
Yes.
So, also, we talked about panties, underwear, whatever you want to call them. Last week I called them panties, and the other lady was like, "Don't call them that." I'm
Like a cringe word for some people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So underwear, bring your underwear to the Inspired
Your
Conference.
undies.
Yeah, your undies on
There we
May
go.
6th. And if you haven't registered yet, please, please, please do. It's going to be an amazing time. You're not going to want to miss it. And so anyway, we're glad. This is our very last episode. We're so glad that you've joined us this whole season long. We've gone through some topics, like we've said earlier, that have not been easy for us to talk about, but so thankful that we have the Word of God to guide us in some of these discussions. And so I'm glad that we got to end this season with a cherry on top, talking about Out of Darkness and how they help our community, because I know for our house at X Church, we are so fired up and pumped about helping our community and being the hands and the feet of Jesus to those around us. So we're glad that you joined us, and tune in next time for season 5.
Thanks for listening today. We hope this episode has inspired you to start a conversation with the women in your life. And we would love to hear from you, your comments, as well as your questions. So email us at inspired@thex.church. And we would love to see you at the Inspired Conference on Saturday, May 6th, here at X Church. Registration is open now. You don't want to miss it. Sign up for the conference at www.thex.church/inspired 2023. And don't forget to join us next week for more conversation in another episode of the Inspired Podcast. See you then.